So imagine this. After helping Bethel push back the forces of chaos, the Nahobino and his allied demons are all looking rather hungry. So, needing to get a stomach-filling meal quick, they decide to grab something from within the netherworld. And while perusing the ley line, Gustav informs them of a new demon-run restaurant marked with golden arches. Heading inside and mere moments away from collapsing from hunger, they quickly select the largest meal they can see on the menu, the Big Mac. And before they can get their burger, does the Pyrojack at the counter ask for his payment. And it is only then does the Nahobino realize that the menu is an old world currency, and with only Macca in their pockets? And knowing very well that the Pyrojack is definitely not going to do the exchange rate math for him, now the Nahobino needs to figure out how much Macca does it take to buy a Big Mac. Now, before we can really answer this question, first we must figure out a few key details involved in the universe. Firstly, what exactly is a Macca coin? Then we need to find an item that exists both in our world and the world of SMT5. And then finally, what year does SMT5 generally take place in? As with all three of these factors figured out, then we can create a sort of real-world conversion rate that will help us understand the value of a Macca. As well, for simplicity's sake, I will be converting into yen. Though I know I normally do it into USD, yen is usually the other predominant currency in SMT outside of Macca. As well, I wanted to exclude any sort of microtransaction currency. I'm almost certain that DX2 doesn't have an option to buy Macca, but I wanted to cover my bases just in case, because I don't find a lot of microtransaction for in-game currency to be very fitting of the actual value of that currency. It's usually greatly inflated. So, with this all understood, let's get into the origins of Macca. Now, Macca is a rather interesting currency, as it has existed in the series since the first Shin Megami Tensei game, and it tends to be the main currency of the games that have some sort of connection to a great cataclysm, taking its hold over the economy post the world's end. The name of the currency doesn't actually seem to draw from anywhere in specific, with the name Macca simply being a romanization of the Japanese name, or the Japanese characters used to make the name, and those characters that comprise it roughly translate to demon currency or magic currency. Now, it frequently takes the form of a golden coin with a logo. This logo is seemingly based off of the lowercase Cyrillic ch sound, or the astrological symbol of Saturn, though some games have depicted Macca as note bills as well, like SMT Imagine, or as just a strange energy source used to create things like in Strange Journey. And these all give emphasis to the magical nature of these coins, which of course could be used in an argument to suggest that Macca is comprised of orichalcum, an ancient metal which some often believe to be pure copper or bronze, and we have found some real-life ingots of it as well, that was used to mint coins and was considered to be on par with gold. Orichalcum has been given a sort of mythical quality over the years as well, due to its mention alongside stories such as Atlantis, and it being the metal in which the gods made their jewelry from. Though, there is one wrench in this whole idea, and it comes from the Persona series. As while Persona may not use Macca as its main currency, in Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, one of your party members, Balfu, uses coins as a weapon, and the game makes a clear distinction between a Macca coin and an orichalcum one. So with this in mind, instead of being made of orichalcum, it's very possible that the Macca coin is comprised of the Dungeons & Dragons player's worst nightmare, the Electrum piece, as Electrum is a metal alloy comprised of gold, silver, and sometimes copper, and it being this mixture of common coinage metals could be linked back to its own creator. As we do actually know the direct source of all Macca, as it is minted by Lucifuge, a demon who, according to the demonology origins of the Grand Grimoire, was given ownership over all worldly possessions, allowing him to become sort of the middleman between granting wishes and claiming souls. So Lucifuge could have selected Electrum for his currency within the demon world, since it was a combination of all the metals that he had dominion over, that of course were tied to coinage. Now, the exchange of real-world money for Macca has been a thing since its origins, from games like SMT4 allowing you to collect relics from the past, like a 1 to 100,000 yen bill that can then be traded in for Macca, to the original game's Nuclear Armageddon of Tokyo, where the player has all their hard-earned yen be considered worthless, but you can eventually trade it with an old man in a bar in Shinjuku for Macca, though he is a collector, so the conversion rate leaves a lot to be desired, with it being roughly 0.08 to 0.12, which means that the old man is suggesting that 8 to 12 yen is the equivalent to 1 Macca. Though I should say I wasn't able to figure out a hard conversion rate from this old guy. As I've seen from multiple playthroughs, the exchange rate seems to change depending on the amount you bring him. So, while this isn't perfect, it is enough to build a general working conversion rate for SMT1. But this doesn't really help with SMT5 as they are separate continuities. Though, while we're here, why not? Now, SMT1 is sort of a contemporary story, taking place sometime within 1990. Because of this, it's fair to assume that it's somewhere around 1992 to 1999, which actually helps us get a pretty direct estimate for how much a Big Mac would be worth, since the time skip of the game is only roughly 30 years, which means that the protagonist and crew are running around in the destroyed Tokyo of the distant dystopian future of 2022 to 2029, which means that we're given a pretty direct answer for the cost of a Big Mac at this time, which was around 480 yen. And if we assume that the least generous conversion rate of 8 yen to 1 Macca, this means that the three heroes of Tokyo could have gotten their Big Mac at roughly 60 Macca apiece. But again, this won't feed the Beano. So instead, we need to nail down a conversion rate for SMT5's Tokyo. This starts by getting a general idea for when the game takes place, and it is said to take place in modern Tokyo again. So it is fair to assume that this is another contemporary setting from the game's release. So, SMT5 is likely taking place within the 2020s, somewhere around 2021 to 2024. We'll just say that as just a guess. Now, with this general timeline, it helps us to figure out not only the price of a Big Mac, but also figuring out how much an item would be worth that we find within the game in our modern time. And similar to SMT4, there are relics that you can collect throughout the game, which can be sold for Macca, though not everything you find is all that useful. For example, you might think that soda would be a good conversion point, but this item text describes it as a can filled to the brim with a mysterious liquid, as well it has a rather repulsing smell. So, this can disqualify it alongside the game console, the trading cards, and jelly, because the jelly description means it's just a chug jug and I ain't ready for that. Though one item, which seems to be just the normal version of the item in our real life, is the Can of Odin, which is a hot pot dish that is comprised of many different ingredients. This meal can be relatively cheap and easy to prepare, so much so that canned Odin meals can be bought from Japanese vending machines. And these vending machine Odins can be bought for roughly 320 yen, and it has maintained that price for at least the last 7 years so far. So it'd be a pretty useful item to track in this specific situation. Now, the Nahobino can sell a can of Odin to Gustav for roughly 800 Macca, though this is not the buying power of that item, as Gustav will buy your more useful items for 1/4 their actual value. This to me implies that he is always buying things at 1/4 their value, so it is always possible that your can of Odin is truly valued at 3,200 Macca. Which means using the canned Odin standard, we get that 320 yen is equal to roughly 3,200 Macca, which is a 10 times exchange rate, which should make calculating the cost of a Big Mac pretty easy, as a Big Mac in 2021 was valued at roughly 390 yen. But of course, there is still the possibility for inflation. In fact, we have seen that. As you might have noticed, in the SMT1 breakdown, the Big Mac was actually 480 yen. This is actually because the Big Mac has raised in price significantly for the first time, so much so that it made news in Japan. So I'll find a conversion rate for both prices. So if we apply the Can Odin standard for the 2001 burger, the Nahobino can fill their stomach for the low price of 3,900 Macca. Or of course, if we use the inflated rate, he can get it for 4,800 Macca. Either way, let's purchase our burger. That's odd. The math should be right. Am I forgetting something?
18 years ago, something happened in the Chiyoda ward of Tokyo that suddenly erased the city from the rest of Japan.
That's right! Within the ruins of the Netherworld, the menus the Nahobino would be ordering from are 18 years old. So we need to flash back to the good old days of 2003 to figure this out. Firstly, we need to refine the cost of canned Odin so that we can continue our standard, which, according to some older websites, a can of Odin used to run for around 200 yen a can instead of 320, which means that we need to remake the whole exchange rate now. As the sell value of Odin remains the same, with Gustav buying at 1/4 its value, this means that 200 yen is now equal to 3,200 Macca, which is roughly 16 times the initial price. And with that found, we now need to find the cost of a Big Mac in Japan in 2003, which was roughly around 260 yen, meaning that for the Nahobino to purchase a Big Mac using a menu from 18 years ago, and converting the Macca from yen using the canned Odin standard, he will be paying roughly 4,160 Macca per Mac. And given that the average party size in SMT5 is around 4 demons, as well factoring in the fact that the Nahobino is eating for 2 since you have Algami, this means that he will be paying roughly 20,800 Macca just to feed his whole group. Though, because I mentioned Persona earlier to this video, there's actually a lot of famous burger joints throughout that series. So what if the Nahobino ended up in these different Persona games with the same Pyrojack in the same situation? So let's start first with Persona 2, as while Persona 1 may have Peace Diner, there isn't actually a way to really order food there, and it's kinda hard to read the menus. Though, Persona 2, we actually can buy a Big Piece Burger, which is my assumption for the Peace Diner's equivalent to that of the Big Mac. And the Big Piece Burger runs us roughly 380 yen in both Sin and Punishment, which are games that take place in 1999, which in using the oldest Odin conversion rate that we have, which is 200 yen is equal to 320 Macca, this means that the Big Bang Burger would run us roughly 5,600 Macca a burger. Next we have the Wild Duck Burger in Persona 3, which is a game that takes place in 2009 and roughly costs about 500 yen, though instead we'll be taking on the Duck Burger Challenge, which feeds just about everyone in the party, and comes out to roughly 1,800 yen. Now, we know that a can of Odin around this time period had its price increased to roughly 300 yen, so the conversion rate itself becomes a bit uglier, but we can still figure it out. Which means that, to take on the Duck Burger Challenge, the Nahobino would be spending roughly 19,200 Macca to finish the challenge, which is actually kind of close to the 5 Big Macs we bought in our normal timeline. And then we get to Persona 4, which doesn't have a burger restaurant, but does have the Beef Bowl Challenge, which could cost a pretty penny, but we know that we're getting it for free since the Nahobino's putting that shit away no problem. And then finally, what if we ended up in Persona 5's Big Bang Burger, which takes place in 2016 and has the cost of a burger being roughly around 480 yen. But lucky for us, we don't actually have to change much, as the cost of Odin, at least can Odin, was around 320 yen in 2016. So our conversion rate remains the same. And it's a conversion that we've done before, if you remember SMT1. So this just means that the Nahobino only owes the Big Bang Burger 4,800 Macca. So, if you're a weird time-traveling blue man, it is best to go to Persona 3 to get the most bang out of your buck? Like, is that count as a buck? And with this all figured out, I think it's time for Pyrojack to fess up that he actually doesn't know how to cook any of these. And speaking of cooking, I've been working on this video for quite a while now. I've been wanting to cover the Macca conversion rate since around the time of the original SMT5's release, and with SMT5 Vengeance just around the corner, I thought there was no better time than now. Though it does leave me wondering if the game will change any significant thing about this conversion rate, such as maybe the text of the Odin, or maybe the value of the Odin itself, or if this will translate over without any issues. So if you're playing SMT5 like I probably am at this moment, then be on the lookout for some Odin to help you figure out just how much you'll need to buy that burger later on. And with that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to help support more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. Every little bit helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to find the conversion rate for Shibadata, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist, well, you can do so by heading on over to buyshimoneta.com.